Everybody, this is Perch. Here's a question I've got. I think there's more to this question that I'm not getting a little bit because it feels like the answer is just really easy. Because the question is, hey Perch, I have a lot of comics. I try and bag and board all of them, but I don't have the money or the time to get all of them bagged and boarded. Does it really matter? Um, I, I mean, sure, it does. If depending on what you're going to do with them. Um, I think. I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting one because bags and boards become kind of a given with a lot of comic collectors. They don't really think about if they should have them or they shouldn't. They just it's built into the price. By the way, my head's kind of like I mean, bags and boards are kind of expensive. I mean, you can get some good deals, especially if you go to your comic shop and you ask for a bunch at a time, or if yeah, I think there's deals on Amazon every now and then. I mean, you can get bags and boards, and not all boards or bags are the same. There's definitely different quality levels, and if you find somebody who's very into kind of collecting and flipping and preserving and grading and kind of all of that material, then they're going to have a very definite opinion on the bag to use, the board to use, the box to use, all those kinds of things. They'll be able to give you exactly from their perspective what you need. But I guess I've had this. In fairness, I have had this question before in the shop, and I think the question is best answered with another question, and that is, well, what's your goal? Like, what are you planning to do? Are you buying these comics with the intent to keep it preserved and sell it for as high amount as possible as an investment? If that's your game, then yes, bags and boards, and honestly, that advice that other people can give you about the type of bags to use, the type of boards to use, keeping it in a temperature controlled location, all that kind of stuff is important, and you should pay attention to it. If you plan to send a lot of your comics off to get slabbed and graded, then you're going to want to take care of these things as closely and tightly as possible. It's going to be something that it's going to be part of your investment. Um, and if you're interested, here's the thing. I don't think you should go halfway. Meaning, if you really believe that the purpose of you buying comics is to get them one day graded and sold, then you should go all in. You should buy what you need to buy. You should get the bags and boards and the equipment and the storage and all that kind of stuff. And you should do it as good as possible because you have a destination in mind. There are some things that will just maximize your investment and your sale. And there's other videos. There's several other videos. I think I'm not sure. I mean, Wes over at Thinking Critical has this Slabbed and Raw show where they talk about some of this. Although I think they're talking at kind of a deeper level than what your question is. But if that is your goal to really get into that, then you need to do the research to figure out exactly the right equipment and stuff to sell. And yeah, you absolutely want to do that. And also, you probably want to start doing things like buying multiple copies or buying it on physical and digital and reading the digital version and not ever touching the physical. I mean, there's lots of things like that. However, that's not all comic buyers. And there's some people who get really snobby about this, which I always find just pointless and stupid. But the reality is there's a lot of people who want to keep their comics in a reasonably good shape. They're not just going to toss them on the ground and step on them and other things. They want to keep them, they would like to read them again at some point. But they don't really have any intention of selling them. They're not buying them for investment. If they fold the cover completely around because that's how they like reading it. I mean, there's a guy who he liked to read his comic by taking the cover and folding it completely back behind the comic, and like pinching the stapler, the crease, in order to hold it that way. And that's how he liked to read it. Now, in doing that, you're quote unquote ruining the comic from a pristine mint condition. So, but it's your dollar, and it's what you want to read. And I think I remember this guy would come into the comic, he'd buy his comics, he'd turn them around, and he'd start, he'd read one there sitting at the counter, and people would be like, "What are you doing? You're ruining that comic book." And his attitude was, I bought it to read it. I bought it to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it the way I want to enjoy it. It doesn't matter. And it was funny because, man, some people would not let it go. I remember this guy kind of bemused sitting there where somebody's like, I can't even look at you. I can't even. Oh my God, I can't even. And the guy's like, What the hell is wrong with you? I mean, if anything, and I pointed this out to the guy who was making such a fuss out of it. I'm like, look, here's somebody who's taking one of these comics out of circulation for you. So later, if you're buying it for market value, if you're buying it to flip, here's one customer that's making your copy more rare if you keep it in a mint condition. And that seemed to mollify the guy. But anyway, um, it's that people are weird. I think that if that's you, if you just care about reading it, then no, bags and boards are not essential. Bags and boards will definitely keep your comic looking and behaving more pristine, but it's not a requirement. And you come across a lot of people who have a lot of different things. For some people, the bag and the board is just storage. I think I mentioned this on a show earlier when I was at the Comic Con recently down in Puyallup. There's this guy who had all these X-Men books, and he was having Claremont sign the bag. He didn't want to open the bag, so he was having Claremont sign the bag the comic was in, which I found bizarre. I had not, I admit in all my years I hadn't seen that one before. But apparently, the guy wanted to, didn't really care about the value, but still wanted the autograph, but didn't want the autograph on the cover because he liked looking at the cover. So this was his solution where he gets the bag autographed. And I mean, again, more power to you. I think it's are you doing this to enjoy your hobby, to enjoy the comic, or are you doing it to try and make an investment out of it? And if you're trying to make an investment out of it, then you do need to adhere to whatever the rules are around that investment, whatever the qualifications are to get the most out of your investment. If that's you, figure out who you are, then yeah, bags and boards, specialty bags and boards, all kinds of different things. Um, I mean, there's your answer. That's why I kind of wonder if there was more to that question than that, because I think, or maybe it's again, maybe it's a case where people feel pressured into bags and boards, and if you're not planning to flip it, if you're not planning to sell it, if you or maybe you do sell but you don't really care how much you make off of it, if it's just like you're buying comics because you love to read comics and that's your deal, then you shouldn't feel pressured to bag and board them. You should do whatever you want with those comics. You should store them however you like. Yeah, they're going to get some creases, they're going to get some folds, the paper may start to, if you're in a high humidity area, it may start to waver a bit or wave a bit. There, pages might yellow if you leave it out in the sun. There's lots of things that can happen with your comic. By the way, one of the things that I found, I don't know, funniest, but kind of along these lines, is I had a collector who was really big into getting the comic graded and everything else, and they did all this, and then they put the comic on the wall in a frame, but they had a skylight, and the skylight, put sun down on this comic book, like half the comic book, like the bottom half. The sunbeam for some of the day just hit the bottom half of this comic. And then, like 2 years, 3 years later, this guy goes to move around the comics and was horrified to discover that the whatever he was storing it in, the whatever he was doing, it was not as protective of the sun as people thought. And he basically had a sun line kind of right down the center of his comic, where the bottom half was faded and the top half wasn't. I've seen a lot, by the way, and this is again a question for somebody who knows more about this than me, but when you get kind of the specialty case and seal, the full slabbing process, everything that goes on there, it's supposed to be kind of sun UV resistant, but I can tell you it's not. Um, it's not foolproof. If you put this thing in direct sunlight, it's going to have an impact. It's like, it's like anything else. It's like suntan lotion. If you put that on and then you stay out in the sun all day, you're still going to get burned. It's only going to give you, some protection, and this is kind of a factor in what goes on. But anyway, so there you go. I mean, do you need bags and boards? No, it's up to you. If you want them, go for it. If not, just enjoy your comic. I do think that unless you're hung up about this stuff, and I don't mean that as a negative, unless you're really into it, you shouldn't add other things into your comic buying experience that's going to make you one day hate it. I think that happens to a lot of people is they just want to read comics, and then they get kind of they dip a toe into the water of kind of grading and bags and boards and specialty storage and everything else, and before long it starts to take away just their peaceful enjoyment of the comic, because they're they're loading in all this other stuff they have to do, and they just find that they just no longer enjoy just picking up the comic, folding the cover back, and reading it. And there's something to be said for that. Anyway, what about you? What's your advice? Always bag and board? Never bag and board? Bag and board if you want. Like, what's your thought on this whole topic? Again, not one of these cutting edge social issue topics to talk about, but a fun one when it comes to comic collecting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.